Welcome, everyone, to another one of our famous Operations Producer Forums. Today, we're going to be talking about communicating in the TV control rooms and studios. With me, I have Jean-Michel from the Directors Branch, and he's going to give the view of the director and how we believe things should be done in the control room and the studios. And then we'll have Jeff Reber, who's going to talk to you from a technician side. So I introduce to you now Jean-Michel Mathurin.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Forgive me, I'm a little nervous. So, first of all, thank you for taking time out of your day to come here and do this with us, because it is important that as we try to make Voice of America not only the biggest production house in the country, but also the best production house in the country. So we certainly need to communicate more and discuss and establish a structure, a culture here at Voice of America. And the way we do that is by communicating, okay? Let's talk about production. This is what we're here to do, and let's talk about the control room. Directors, as you all know, you come in the control room, you see what we do. We call camera 1, camera 2, roll 11, roll 11, roll 82. That is the simple part. That is the aftermath of everything we do. That's essentially 5 to 10% of what we do. 90% of what we do is in the preparation. And without preparation, nothing gets done. It's a stack of dominoes that you're putting together, and if you're missing some dominoes, you've got to find other ways to fill that in, otherwise the whole production falls apart. So the very first thing we need to do is to discuss how do you communicate with your director when you are putting together your show, your production, whatever it may be, whether it's news or anything else. Whatever you conceptualize in your mind is what you want to see on the screen. You therefore need to discuss that with your director, because the director is the connection between what you have in your mind and the equipment that we have in order to make it appear on the screen. It doesn't magically appear on the screen. We don't have a button where we push and things happen. We have to put all the plans into place. We have to put all the dominoes into the right place in order to make things happen. On your desk, you will find that we have give you the best practices guide. It is a book that Steve Springer and I, a few years ago, I'd like everyone to take a look at that, get a copy of that. I invite you to, at your leisure, take a look at that, go through it, and make sure you understand in precise terms what these paragraphs talk about. Yes, sir. It is, so did you all hear that? On SharePoint, you'll find it on best practices page. It is important that you look at that, because this is the language and this is the culture that we go by here at Voice of America. And this is the focal point where we all start to make television here at Voice of America. I see a lot of you here. We've got veteran producers here. We've got new producers here, but it doesn't matter whether you've produced at CNN or ABC or Al Jazeera. When you come to every production house, everyone has their own culture. There's a way everyone, there's a different structure on how to do things, and there are ways we say it, and there are ways we put it together. So it is important that you look through the best practices guide and find resources that you need and find the people that you need in order to get your production on the air properly. Responsibilities. It is important that you, let me advance this here. Let's see, am I going the right way? There you go. Responsibilities. Your responsibility is to conceptualize your broadcast, okay? I want to do this, I want to have my anchor stand here, I want this happening in the screen, that is beautiful. Creativity is what television is all about. It is important that you write that down. Don't try to remember anything in television. That's the other thing I tell everybody. Do not try to commit it to your mind and say, I'll remember it when time comes. You will not. I can guarantee you that something will happen in that control room. You will forget what you wanted to say, what you were about to do. Write it down. Write everything down. Write it in detail. Put it in the rundown. The rundown is the language we speak. You can tell the director something, but it's also important to put it in the rundown, because as he goes about, when things are happening, a camera is not framed properly, the talent needs to move, he immediately forgets what you just told him 10 seconds ago. But if it's in the rundown, when he turns to the rundown, he will see it. He will remember it. So it is important that it is in the rundown. So it is your responsibility as the one who conceptualizes the show. You are the architect. You plan it. You want the kitchen here. You want the bathroom here. This is how you want it. We put it together. So it is important that you have it documented in the rundown. The rundown is the language we speak. Everything has to be in the rundown. You will hear that over and over and over from directors. It is not in the rundown, therefore I don't know what you're talking about. And you will say to him, but I just told you 10 minutes ago. It doesn't matter, because he's looking at several things. He's got a headset. There are 5 people talking in his ear that he's got to answer to. If it is not documented in the rundown, when he turns and is following the show, if it is not there, he will look over it. You'll find some directors who will remember certain things, but there are a lot of details he won't remember unless it is in the rundown. So it is important that you put it in the rundown. The other responsibility is you have got to talk to your director early. The earlier, the better. Several conversations are important. You can tell him, this is what I'm thinking. You can tell him, this is what I have. And you can tell him, this is what I have done. All the way to when we are in the control room to execute the broadcast itself, that communication needs to continue. Unless it does, something is going to fall through the cracks. We all want to, because not only do you have to communicate to him or her, the director also has to communicate to the crew. If you tell me you want this individual here, I have to talk to the camera operator, and I have to talk to the floor director, and I also have to talk to the audio operator. All of that is a sequence of events that happen with the information that you've given me. What's important for a director, when you tell him you want to do something, there are 3 things that he's got to think about. How do I get into the event, and how do I get out of the event? Those 3 sequences is the transition. When you see a director go and take 1, take 2, take 3, that's the easy part. It's how he gets to the camera and how he gets out of the camera to the next event. These are what cause the main issues in the control room. So that's why he wants you to talk to him. He or she wants you to talk to him to discuss it, because that is the important part of getting into and out of a broadcast. We would prefer English, and we want English to be the universal language in the control room. Why? Because if you are talking to a Skype, for example, speaking a different language, and the guy says, I can't hear, okay? If I overhear that, I can automatically tell the audio operator, check his IFB, make sure he hears. Or if he's saying, I'll be back in 10 seconds, we'll know not to worry about it. But if I have to wait for you to translate for me, something may be lost in the translation there. we would like it to be in English. So that way we can also not only hear what you're telling me directly, we also want to overhear what's happening in the background. We want you, if you're discussing the teleprompter is not in the right place. That tells me, focus on my talent, follow him now, forget the teleprompter. But if you're not telling me that's the issue, then I don't know where the problem is originating. I can't help you. I or any other director, we can't help you. You've got to explain, we've got to be able to understand, to be inside each other's world. As the same way you hear me when I'm saying camera 2 is not working, and you can look ahead as the producer and say, I have this on camera 2, we'll change it and make it camera 1 later. Even though I haven't told you that, but you've overheard me discuss it with the camera operator saying, this camera is not working. That's the way it needs to be in the control room. We need to be able to overhear your conversation. We need to be able to understand everything that's happening with you, with the talent, with the crew, and even with the remote person that you're talking to. I understand there are times here at Voice of America, the person that we're talking to does not speak English. That's okay. But allow us an opportunity to understand what's happening around us in order to provide you with the service that you are asking for. Line producer and director are co-pilots of this aircraft, okay? Director is piloting the ship, but you are my guide. You've got to tell us if, in a perfect world, a line producer basically sits next to the director and watches the event happen because he's got all the information. He's just piloting the ship. All you're doing is watching your time. You're watching and make sure, okay, I need to hit this package at 21:50. I need to hit this break at 50:17, and you're watching him do his work. Because we've already talked about the show. We've already discussed everything we need to happen. All the information is in the rundown, the graphics, and he's looking ahead. You're looking ahead with him. Everything is happening. All you're doing is sitting there and watch him do his thing. If he needs something ahead, he'll ask you, or you'll say, hey, you know, I'm going to kill this, I'm going to change that, fine, and he'll get that in. But it is essential that the communication happens between the director and the line producer throughout the broadcast without having other people calling in directions from the back row or from anywhere else in the control room. That communication needs to happen if someone is in the control room. As a producer, you need to maintain control of your broadcast. It is entirely your responsibility to maintain control of that broadcast. If the broadcast goes bad, 2 people are responsible, producer and director. Whether you like it or not, 2 people are responsible, producer and director, when the broadcast goes bad. So that communication, if someone from your service is coming in, they need to do something. They need to communicate that through you to the director. Never shout out whatever it is that needs to happen. Never scream things, and if there is a problem, discuss it. Pass that message along through the producer. That way, the reason for that is we hear one voice as directors. We want to hear one voice. That way we can listen, and when you say something that's important, we'll hear it. Again, we've got a headset, got a floor director in our ear, we've got a camera operator in your ear, we've got the audio operator in your ear, and at times you also have a remote source somewhere else in your ear. So you've got 4 people talking, and you've got to be able to not only figure out what's important, because there are times everybody talks at the same time. At that point, the director has to figure out who is more critical to respond to right now. Now, depending on where you are, everybody thinks my situation is critical right now. The director, however, has to determine what's critical. If the camera operator is saying, well, I can't see this person here, well, I'm rolling a package at this point. The Chiron operator is saying, I don't have a Chiron. What's critical for me right now is, do I have the package I'm rolling? Because I can stand by on all these folks. Chiron doesn't have his Chiron, I can kill it. Camera operator's Chiron is not working, I can't worry about him for now. Once I get into the package, then I can worry about everyone else. You understand? So it's important that we coordinate that communication. And in the control room, it is important that everyone communicates their concerns through the line producer. And that line producer will then tell the director, listen, I don't have that remote. But when you communicate that with the director, the other important thing to know as a producer is, if you're saying, I don't have a remote, you need to immediately come up with a solution to the problem for the director. I don't have this package, we're going to do this. Once you do that, you also tell your talent, I don't have this package, we're going to do this. If you, otherwise, what you've just told them is, I don't have a package. The next question from everyone is, what do we do now? What do you want us to do? You've got to come up with that solution. I don't have the package. We're going to stay on camera. We're going to do a VO. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back. We can hear you. But once you say, I don't have the package, and you don't have a solution to fill that hole for us, at that point, what you've done is you've allowed everyone to figure out a plan for you. And that may not always fall into the same plan. You understand? The talent you just told, I don't have a package, is thinking, okay, you don't have the package, well, let me go back to the remote. The remote is not there because you haven't told him what to do. You've got to tell him you don't have the package, do this. If, for example, the talent is leading, which is something that happens very, very often in control. Talent is leading to a remote that's not available. He's leading to the remote because he thinks the remote is there. You've got to tell him the remote is not there, read the next VO. You've immediately told him what to do rather than just tell him the remote is not there. Because once you tell him the remote is not there, you've got to guide him as to where to go. Because otherwise, he's looking at the teleprompter, who was just friendly a minute ago, just turned into an enemy. Because the teleprompter now has questions for the remote. So he immediately has to either do or looks down and read the next question down here. You've got to tell him that. You as the producer also have to tell the teleprompter operator, you've got to go to the next page. Go to the next page. I don't have the remote. Read the prompter. He can follow that. But if you just tell him, I don't have the remote, he won't know what to do. And that always causes tension in the control room because he doesn't have any direction. Remember, the talent is out there under the lights and looking at the camera and looking at the red light, and he sees himself on camera. And you just told him, you don't have the remote. He's looking at the next question on the teleprompter. Now he's looking, his brain is going 100 miles an hour. What do I do now? Unless you come in his ear and tell him what to do, he's going to throw you to the wolves, guaranteed. And that's when the control room tends to panic because we don't know what he's doing next. So it is important to prepare and communicate and also have a plan to make sure that your production has a way in and a way out. Always think about, how do I get into an element and how do I get out of it? That helps you into getting a good production. Unless anyone has any questions, the next guest is going to be Jeff Reber, who will tell you how to operate the equipment and how to communicate with different positions in the control room. Any questions? Yes.
If you have,
One thing about, I'm not sure I understand.
if you had one thing you could change the most, one thing that's not going well, sort of,
Immediately would be speaking English in the control room totally all the time, every time. That would be the first thing. Number two is getting, it's another point that I forgot to mention here, getting to the control room on time, which means early. When we say get to the control room 30 minutes, it means 30 minutes. Now, for most of you, it's boring. I don't have anything to do in the control room. Why am I sitting there in 30 minutes? Because the show is well prepared, but my switcher is not working, or my audio has a problem. I need you there to tell you that, to formulate a plan to get out of that situation. Proud. Talks about games. Directors will always talk. Directors, yep.
Trying to communicate and he's too busy talking.
You need to interrupt him. He's not there to do games. He's there to direct the show. You can interrupt him at any time.
It doesn't work, then.
Say it again.
It doesn't work, interrupting in his ear and he keep talking, he could not listen because his voice is my voice, so.
Then you need to let someone know about that. Directors will always talk. You'll find that all over the world. But you can interrupt them at any time to communicate information about the broadcast.
Yeah, definitely, we tried, you know.
You've got to make that very, very, your number one focus. If anything you want to say to the director, whether tall. Yeah.
Urdu?
Urdu.
She's in charge of the director.
Sure.
Yeah, you've got to be able to, you can interrupt the director at any time, but it is important to show up in the control room on time. If you show up 10 minutes to air, you're late and you're very late. Your production is compromised. There's no doubt about it. At that time, what you've just done is you've allowed the director to make all decisions about your broadcast for you. You don't have a say-so anymore at that point. His job is to protect the integrity of the broadcast at that point. He's taking over. Now, if you show up, if you're going to be late, you can say, in a perfect world, everybody be there 30 minutes ago. But yeah, there are times when things are busy, we're doing production. You can call them and say, hey, I'm gonna be 15 minutes late. I'm running late, I've got everything. Do you need anything from me? But I'll be in the control room in 10 minutes. It is important to do that. But do not make it a habit to show up in the control room past your 30-minute broadcast, because that does several things. Your crew tends to not worry about you anymore because they don't think you're going to be there on time, so they're not worried about it either. They worry about it when you show up. Okay? So if you're going to show up 5 minutes to air, you've got 30 minutes setup time. Nobody sees you. Nobody sees anyone from the service. The producer is not there. The teleprompter operator is not there. The talent is not there. And then you show up 2 minutes to air and you want to see, I want to see myself on camera. I can't see myself. I want to make sure that I'm powdered up. I can't hear anything in the prompter. We can't do anything for you at that point. There's nothing I can do for you. You've got to go on the air, and at that point, I tell you where to look and I tell you what to do because you were not there on time to check. Okay? It is important to show up on time to discuss. We can do anything within that 30 minutes. We could do just about everything you want. We can get you to hear what you want. We can get you water. We'll put you on the air. You can see what you want. And you also have an opportunity to rehearse things that you're not sure about. Take a look at it. Rehearse it. You'll be amazed how important that is when you rehearse something, how well it works after you've rehearsed it. But if you're showing up 5 minutes to air, 10 minutes to air, we can't rehearse anything. You're getting it hot, and that's when you roll and open. Now, if you have a broadcast, you roll the open, and it's the wrong open, in the mind of the viewer, you've had 12 hours. Yesterday at noon, 24 hours. Yesterday at noon, you did this broadcast. You've had 24 hours. Now, how can you roll the first event in the show, and it's wrong? You're not prepared. That's as simple as that. Because had you checked it, you would have realized something is wrong and you would have come up with a plan. If you don't put it on the air, the viewer didn't know you had it in the plan. So it's important to be there, check these things. We're dealing with electronic equipment. Check them, and check them again. That's why it's important to be in the control room on time. That 30 minutes, those 30 minutes are critical. It may sound just mundane to you. It's boring. And there are times, as you say, director may, he's talking about last night's games, talking about his kids, talking about his wife, talking about his family. You as a producer, you can interrupt him at any time and say, can we check this? Can we rehearse my open? Can we rehearse this? Can I see my full screens? Can I check my chirons? All of that. That time is for you, and it's for the service, it's for the broadcast. It's for everyone to check. Any other questions? Does that answer your question?
It does, and if nobody else has a question, I have a follow-up.
Anyone else? No? Please.
You mentioned that every production house has a different culture or standard and procedure. VOA is very unique, of course, because we have one house doing, I don't know, 30 languages, and a lot of us came from different stations, and they had different procedures. What is one sort of procedure or way of being or set of roles in the control room that stands out for you as a way that VOA is different?
Clearly, the language is the number one thing. The language is the number one thing. The number two is convincing people being there on time. It's for their own good. And the other is you're sort of dealing with 4, 5, 6, I mean, as many language services. It's sort of like, the way I like to explain, it's like dealing with as many TV stations in one day. It's that sort of thing. But it's important to keep the language, because the language we all need to speak is television, using English. But we are doing television, whether it's in Mandarin or Farsi or Urdu. It's television. The viewer, I need to be able to turn off my volume and look at the television without hearing the language and understand what's happening on that screen fairly clearly. Doesn't matter whether I'm in China or in Ukraine or in Haiti. It's all the same. It's television. Because if anyone can see wherever they are in the world, if they can see Voice of America, they can certainly see Al Jazeera, they can see CNN, they can see BBC, because it's all on the satellite. It's not a secret. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
In the language staff,
Mhm.
what is the protocol now? The chief of the service and director and managing the producer and all that. How does that protocol go? Who has all the charge? You are in charge of doing TV and you're doing radio. So where's the line drawn?
That is a question better answered by someone higher than me. That part I don't know. I can explain to you how to do radio and TV. I can explain to you the mechanics of it. But who takes precedent and who is in charge of what, that answer I can. That question I can't answer.
Decisions like that, language program. I mean, if not your division director, your service chief, then they would refer.
Right. I can answer any questions from the directorial standpoint, from sitting in the control room and making it happen on the screen. I can answer any question. But in terms of who's in charge of how it's done, that part is way above my pay grade. Any other questions? Anyone else? Shabnam, I know you have a question. Go ahead. What's your question?
I find that I've been doing
Hmm?
and it was
Correct.
TV language
Mm-hmm.
that everybody I put it in the other column and then it gets missed, you know? So it would just be really good if we have a guideline as producers, exactly where each item goes.
Fantastic question. What we do with that is when you communicate with your director early, all that stuff will be worked out. All that will be worked out. Some directors have preferences. You know, I like to look here, some other people like to look there, some other people like to, you know. Directors have their own preferences. Some people will say, yeah, just don't worry about it, I know how to do this. If you have a communication early with your director, it may be within the 30-minute setup time that you have while going over the show. You will be able to catch these things much earlier rather than during the broadcast, and that can be worked out.
Don't say if,
Yes.
you should.
Yes, go over, make sure the information that you have jives with what he has. And you're absolutely right. Some directors, given their experience in other places and speak slightly different languages, and we are trying our best to try to correlate that into one television language. And that's what we're talking about. It's the television culture here to establish that and make sure everybody follows that instead of letting everyone do their own thing. But that's the, yes, sir.
Quick question, so
Director may have a rundown where the CGs need.
Yeah, it depends. Some directors, yes, some directors like to see their CGs in one because the frame of what we're looking at. And
I just think that if you need to expect a standard,
absolutely, I agree with you. I,
something needs to.
I don't disagree with that. If we have a conversation, we should be able to get that straightened out. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I have a great recommendation. I was having need to change in the rundown, and then I called Ross, and we sat down for an hour, and we set a standard rundown that every day could meet everything my director needs.
Yep. Like we have a system. If I write it the way our main director wants me to write it, which is the standard way of writing the rundown for us, and then they can't read the language, and a lot of stuff gets missed in the show because I don't want to interrupt the director because he's already a new director, like already trying to communicate with everybody else, and sometimes a lot of stuff gets missed. I mean, it's not like packages are not getting missed, but like the OTS, a Chiron here, you know, it's just sometimes it's really hard to.
If you have that, just let us know. Let me or Lisa know. We'll be able to standardize that. That shouldn't be a problem. It really should not be. It should be one set of if I come to do a show that I don't normally do, I usually try to go through it, and if I find information that's in a place that I ordinarily don't look for, I just change it for my own set of, because the bottom line is to make sure the director has the information that he needs in order to execute the broadcast. But, you know, it is just the same way it is for you to talk to the director, is also the director's responsibility to look through the rundown and make sure everything is to the way that he's going to execute the broadcast.
Yeah, the expectation will be, we wish we had.
They're never gonna be as familiar with of them to be. So, again, like Jean-Michel suggested, during the setup time,
Go over it with
I
him.
need that director and the producer to be looking, what don't you get, let's go, if it is a problem.
Yes, use that 30 minutes. Always, always, always use the 30 minutes to your advantage.
And he updates and we update together sometimes the style guide. So when you have the style guide, the rundown, it's not that it becomes irrelevant, but if the new substitute director gets that, once they see the rundown, everything is just easier to follow. So, I mean, that's one of the things, but I do agree that everybody, just because when we get substitutes, it's harder, even if we do all the best to communicate with them.
It doesn't, yes. Yes, sir.
To pay on that is, in my show, sometimes I have different requests. Even if the show is already built, the same rundown pretty much every week, it happens that, you know, some of the talents have specific requirements that really go beyond the regular rundown. So most of the time what I'll do, I'll pick up the phone call to, you know, call Jean-Michel and say, this is what my show will look like. What do you suggest me to do on the rundown so we can speak the same language while in the studio? And he has been very accommodating doing that. So I'll probably suggest some of my colleagues here to, a phone call can arrange things way before within 30 minutes. Just, okay. So, all right.
Yeah, always look in the rundown. It's key for producers to know who is directing the broadcast before they get to the control room. It shouldn't be a surprise to you the minute you walk into the control room, oh, so-and-so is directing. You should know that already. Even if he's doing another show prior to yours, you should already have an idea of who's going to be directing my show. That's in schedule. That's, you know, a phone call should be fairly easy. I think time is running out here. Jeff Reber, ladies and gentlemen, is the supervisor of operations and studios.
Thanks. Good afternoon. Okay, control room communications. So as from a technician standpoint, we receive all of our instructions from the director. So sometimes we may have a circumstance where a producer may ask us to do something, or we'll hear a producer or someone else say, roll the tape, or whatever, roll delete. So it's important to understand that unless a director asks us to do something, we won't do it, because all those things have to come from the director. And it's important because, you know, the director is in charge and responsible overall for the show and the running of the show. So if something needs to be done, or if there's a change to the show, it should go through the director, and then the director will notify us that there's a change, and then he'll suggest on how we should implement the change. The line producer, yeah, usually the line producer, from a technician standpoint, we don't have that much to do, or that much information, other than once the line producer arrives into the control room, we'll ask them about remotes, that kind of thing, whether there's, what the phone numbers are if they're not included in the delete rundown, the phone numbers for the IFB and for the coordination line. And then we'll ask them questions about how many guests there may be if that's not included in the rundown, that kind of thing. The executive producer, sometimes the executive producer is the person who comes into the control room and makes the coordination calls and the IFB calls, and these are for the remotes. Sometimes if the technicians, it usually would be the audio technician, if they have enough time to make these calls during setup, they will. But they often don't, because they're setting up, they're preparing for the show. So it's important for someone to come into the control room and make these telephone calls to the IFB and to the for IFB and for coordination, especially if it's going to happen during the show. During a show, the audio technician is mixing the show, and he or she has to concentrate on the show at hand, and certainly doesn't have enough time to make a phone call and establish a two-way communication with the remote. The talent, Jean-Michel mentioned to have everyone from production to come in a half hour early. Usually hosts will come in later than that. The reason why it's important for hosts to come in as soon as possible is that we want to make sure that we're getting good audio level from the host. The host is going to give us a mic check. We also want to make sure that the host hears everything, hears the remote. If we have established the remote already, and hopefully we have, the host could speak with the remote guest, and that's very helpful. And that way we can establish two-way communication. Just because you can talk to the host or the remote guest in the control room doesn't mean that the host can control or speak with them. It's a different process. So we just want to make sure that everything is working. We have communications going through all the remotes to the host and any guest. But also, it's really important for the host to get there because we want the host to look as good as possible. If the host arrives 5 minutes before air or less, we can't spend the time that we need to make the host look as good as he or she can look. We have the ability to zoom in and select skin tones on individual hosts, and then we can soften the detail on just the skin tones, and that makes them, perhaps look more attractive, or look or less. Yeah, right. That's time consuming, so we don't have the ability to do that if a host arrives 5 minutes before air. And also when a host arrives in the studio, they want to look at themselves on air, and I understand that. But if they arrive late, we don't have that opportunity. We need to shade the cameras. They need to look at cameras so we can check our focus. And if we're doing all that, they're not going to be able to see themselves. And I understand that they want to, but then they're going to have to arrive at a reasonable time for us to be able to do that.
As well as to adjust any lighting that needs to be adjusted.
Exactly, that's exactly right.
And to make sure you're on your mark.
Right, because some hosts they have different skin tones. And so we have to adjust the iris on the camera, especially depending on what they're wearing. If they're wearing a dark suit and their flesh tones are light, then that's a special adjustment as far as the iris is concerned. So we want the host and everybody and the guests to arrive as early as possible so we can make them look as good as possible and sound as good as possible. Technical director. The technical director, when they get into the control room, what they're going to first do is they're going to look at the rundown, the light rundown. They're going to see if there's any remotes. They're going to see if there's any double boxes or any other kind of boxes that are called for, and they're going to prepare for that. They're going to call master control, and they're going to say, hey, we have a remote with Boston. Can you tell us where we're going to find that? And hopefully on the Delette rundown, we will see the IFB number that we can use to call to establish an IFB line, and also a coordination line. And the audio technician, if there's time during setup, will establish that on, because it just makes sense for the audio person to set it up if there's time, so that way we can make sure that we have the communication. Sometimes the show may be so complex where we may not have enough time to set up for remotes. And in that case, we really appreciate it for a producer to come in or someone to come in to help establish those lines. So the technical director is also going to, if there are remotes, he's going to be checking the shading of the cameras at the remote location. He's going to be communicating with, if there's going to be a Skype with the intake center, to let them know where the intake center, the Skype people are going to let him know what Skype they're going to be using, and he's going to put them in the routers. Maybe if we're going to have a Skype guest first, he'll put that Skype guest in router 1 and router 2. Maybe there's going to be some other remote. So we like to put things in sequential order. That way everybody knows what to expect. Producers know that if they want to communicate with router 1, then they're going to, if they're in 52, it's going to be R521. These are conventions that we like to use. So even though we're going to have all this stuff written down and we're going to provide something that's going to list all the ways to communicate with the router sources, the remotes, and also the hosts and guests, it's also easy for all of us if we have something standardized, and that's what we really like to do. The audio operator during setup is going to be putting out mics, doing mic tests, check IFBs in the studio. They're going to be, if they have the time, they're going to be calling up remotes. They're going to be checking audio levels, audio quality with Skypes, remotes, microphones. And like I said, if the hosts, when the host arrives, we'll be doing a mic check with the host to make sure that the host can hear through the IFB. These are things we check during setup. But just because a tech, like let's say the floor director can hear through an IFB and then we can hear the tech talking on the microphone, they're not going to be talking at the same level as a host would. Some hosts are louder than others, and some hosts are softer spoken. Some have trouble hearing in a particular ear and are different reasons. So we really like, it's important for the host to be there, like I said before, so we can get all these checks. What the floor director does is when he or she arrives, he's going to set up the studio depending on the show. There's marks on the floor. He's going to position the cameras where they need to go. He's going to put out the microphones sometimes for the audio technician. He's going to put plasma monitors where they need to be. When the hosts or guests arrive, he's going to be miking the hosts. He's going to be putting in the IFBs. He's going to be dressing the cables so they're not going to be seen on camera. He's also going to be cueing the hosts and guests to different cameras. Sometimes there may be technical reasons why maybe the host is normally going to go from camera 1 to camera 2 during a particular segment. But let's say the box, let's say that we're going to go to an OTS. Let's say that box is killed for whatever reason, for technical reasons or whatever. The host needs to pay attention to the floor director because the floor director is going to be there and he's going to, or she's going to say, you know, stay on camera 1. That kind of thing. Any questions so far regarding the positions? Yes, John. Right. Mm-hmm.
Can I piggyback on that? You know, Jerry and I don't take any There's a rhythm to operation in the control room. Okay, number one, if I might, John Michel may have mentioned this before, I came in late. The executive producer is ultimately responsible for the show. Executive producer in terms of editorially what's going into the show, all the elements are going into the show, the buck stops there, the EP is overall in charge. The idea to doing a successful live or live to tape show is being one step ahead of the game. That's where the line producer comes in terms of the line producer should be the most familiar with the rundown, all the elements. So if a remote goes out or if we lose a guest or a tape's not ready, it's the line producer who lets everybody know. Item 7, man, we kill it, we're moving on to item 8. That person drives the train and is talking directly to the director. So the director knows exactly where we are. The key is staying one step ahead of the program all along, so you know what elements coming up next, and you're prepared to go to it. If it's not ready, to go to the next. The EP oversees all of this, but keep things very simple in the control room for the rhythm. The line producer is following that show, driving that train, and talking to the director.
Yep, that's good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that expansion. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Hmm?
What is your current?
Well, white and black isn't good, especially white. There's some confusion because when some producers or others are watching TV, they may see a host wearing white or something that appears to be white. Often it's not white, but even if it is white, they're dealing with high definition video. The latitude, I don't know the exact specifics, but the latitude in high definition between pure black and pure white, let's say there's 5,000 steps. In standard definition TV, which we're working in, let's say there's 100 steps. So if someone were to show up in the control room, in the studio wearing white, we either have to adjust our iris for the white, which is going to probably make their face too dark, or we're going to have to make lighting adjustments to increase the light on the face. So in other words, there's a lot of things that we have to do to make white presentable on standard definition television. In high definition, there's more latitude. So the color of the clothing, and this is something that continues to happen, wearing white is a big problem. Another problem is not wearing something in the studio that will allow us to easily attach a microphone or an IFB. If someone were to show up in a dress, mostly that's women, it's difficult to attach a mic and to do it discreetly because we don't have any way to attach it. We can't attach it to a blazer or anything. So and it's also time consuming. So it's especially important if something like that's going to happen that that the host shows up early enough so we can figure out how we're going to mic the individual. So not being able to attach a mic easily, that happens a lot, and it continues to happen a lot.
And we'll continue.
Right.
All day long, but for years,
Right, and I'm talking mostly about host. Something as simple as a belt. Like you can wear a dress, but if you have a belt, that allows us more latitude about how to attach things, especially if it's a wireless mic. Because you have a wireless mic and a wireless IFB, those are two things that need to be attached to something. Yes? Right, there's something called the Moray effect. It's not such an issue with high definition TV, but again, we're standard definition. If the patterns are too tight, it's going to
You become electric.
yeah, it's like, it's pulsating. It's very distracting. That's something that I guess you just learn, and you have ties or shirt patterns that you don't wear if you're on camera, but sometimes you may forget. And there's not really too much you could do about that. I don't know of anything you can do if you have a tight pattern, other than soften the focus, and we don't want to do that.
So, to answer your question, blues, reds, not whites, and for ties, solids or large pattern. Stripes are okay as long as they're wider stripes, not tight stripes, and checks, big checks, not little tiny checks. And make sure you have something you attach a microphone to.
Usually it's not a problem with gentlemen because they have ties or sports coats, but sometimes it's a problem with women.
And if you watch, go ahead and watch other networks and see where, and take a look and see where, especially the women, wear the microphone. And you can see sometimes it gets all bunched up here at the collar or on a dress that has no collar, and it looks pretty hideous.
John? Yeah.
That's an ongoing issue, particularly with men.
That's true because
Everybody needs TV makeup, not just makeup that you have at home or you put on in the office. TV makeup, it's different, and you'll look better.
I might add, as we go to HD, that's going to be almost a month.
When we go to HD. Yes, you did.
yeah, we want to avoid shiny spots especially. It's very distracting. To your eye, if you see someone, they may not look shiny, but for some reason it's because of the lighting that we use in TV. It's very distracting, especially for gentlemen that are balding. It's very distracting. So that's why it's important to put some makeup, and it's not noticeable if you're concerned about that. It's not noticeable on TV. In fact, if you look at yourself in the mirror, you may think that the makeup person has put too much makeup on you. But on TV, it doesn't look like that at all. In fact, you usually look better. Almost always look better.
We've been so much better than we used to be as far as having a makeup artist in the building for all of the shows. It's rare when it doesn't happen.
Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. I've been told that we need to go a little bit quicker. This is 50, right? This is the new 50. The floor director is going to be in there with the host, the guests. We provide water. I don't know how we're going to provide water in some of these locations, as far as, just having a place to stick the cup, and especially this the circular set right here. 50 looks really nice. I encourage everybody to check it out. We've got a chroma key screen there in the corner. I'm going to go to the next one. This is the control room. Jean-Michel mentioned something about buttons. Well, as technicians, we have a lot of buttons. And the technical director is right over here. He has a switcher, and he's in charge of all the